Hey everybody, welcome back to Mentality Mondays, Healthy Masculinity Conversations. I'm Magnus Dallier, the Mentality Project Coordinator, and I'm here today with my co-host Chelsea Hill and our lovely guest Meredith Smith, joining us from the Title IX office at Tulane. So I'm going to let Chelsea and Meredith introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick off the episode. Happy Monday.
Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea Hill. I use she and they pronouns. I'm one of the health promotion specialists here at the Well, specializing in sexual health, sexual violence prevention, and men's engagement initiatives on campus.
And hi, I'm Meredith Smith. I use she, hers pronouns. That is a very large jet going over my house. I'm the assistant provost for Title IX and Clery compliance and the university sexual misconduct response and Title IX coordinator. And I'm coming up on 5 years here at the institution. And my job is to ensure our compliance with Title IX, the Clery Act, the Violence Against Women Act, and to really provide oversight to our larger efforts to address sexual misconduct here at Tulane.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You've just touched on a wide range of things that you do, but if you want to tell us a little bit more specifically about what kind of work you're doing and what drove you to do the work that you're currently doing, why you like what you do, and what you think is important about it, that'd be fantastic.
Okay. So I have been doing kind of this work that's involved in investigations and responding to sexual misconduct for about a decade now, with a pause where I got for a year to finish up a master's degree, though my master's thesis was on Title IX and the use of the Title IX equity obligation to address sexual misconduct. That is that Title IX is much broader than just investigations and adjudication. I was an investigator, working first in the student conduct office and then in a civil rights investigations office, and was a deputy Title IX coordinator. And now I'm in this role, which I enjoy this so much more than investigating. That I can't even say. There comes the second jet.
It's over us as well.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's my daily flyby. I feel like it's just personal for me. My job is, I think at a day-to-day level, is unlike Chelsea, I'm not specifically working in on those prevention and direct response. In fact, I'm not a direct responder the way that like victim services is, CPSS, our conduct office for student investigations, our OIE office for faculty and staff. What I'm doing is making sure that all of the efforts that our offices are doing are compliant. But as I say that, we want to make sure that we're compliant, but first we need to make sure that we're doing right by our student body. So in our community. So that's the prism that I use in terms of the coordination of compliance that my job is asking for. Title IX is both very broad, but then it's also very particular, especially in light of the regulations. So there is a lot of work that I have to do to audit the work that we're doing. So I do a lot of internal data analysis as well as supervision of how just all of our different functions to make sure that they're working well. What I enjoy most about the job is the helping piece. It's always what I've liked the best, is to be able to help people get what they deserve, which is to continue at this university and to get their education, because that's a right that we all have. We all have a right to an education free from discrimination. And in Title IX is saying an education that's free from discrimination on the basis of sex. And so to either work on specific individual issues, when people say like something's gone wrong in my case, or I don't know what to do in terms of my options, to be able to help people in that way, but just the larger and broader community work of how are we continuing every day to do better than we did the day before in addressing sexual discrimination, harassment, and violence. That's what I like the very most about my job. I'll be honest, my job is really hard. It's hard to be involved in the worst days of people's lives. Every day of my life now. But what keeps me going is that the incredible amount of change and progress that we make by staying committed to the work. So that's what I enjoy the most. And I have to say too, that I really enjoy Tulane. Like I've worked at a lot of different schools. Before I moved into conduct work and investigation work, I taught and I did academic advising and stuff. And so I've worked with and for a lot of schools. And I really enjoy just the vibe at Tulane. It makes this work so much better to be in such a unique and cool community.
It's great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing what you do. And I don't know about Magnus, but I can certainly hear the passion in your voice. And I know Tulane is very lucky to have a Title IX coordinator such as you, who just genuinely cares about making Tulane a better place. And that those are the types of people that we need to continue to do this work that we're doing. And so you talked a lot about the services that Tulane, that Title IX provides. And so, just for folks that might be tuning in today that might have missed Julia's recording, no shade, but I'm just wondering if you could just talk more about what the Title IX office is, and just, a brief summary of all the awesome work and resources that y'all provide.
Sure. So my office is, like I said, versus your direct response, like your first line offices of CMVSS, conduct, OIE, the TUPD, if you want to engage with them, and we can talk about that more about how they are an option, but not an automatic option for us, for folks who are a little hesitant about engaging with the police for good reasons. My office is literally in that kind of oversight role when it comes to the first response, in that making sure that we are providing everything that we are required to by Title IX, by our own policies, by the Violence Against Women Act, and by Clery. So that's a whole lot of things usually that are focused in on the response side. So after we receive a disclosure from a student that comes to the university's attention, that's what my job is, to make sure that all of the pieces that these different laws are saying have to fall into place are. And so I get involved in cases. I'm doing oversight to make sure that all of those, check boxes are being checked off. But usually when students are engaging with me, it's for one of two reasons. First, I want to talk about my options. Either they've talked with CMVSS or with conduct or OIE already, and they really want to tease out more about that process. And I'm a good person to do that with, because I know the process inside and out. I know, we could talk through, if you did this, here are the different branches that you can go through. One thing I can't do is, I have folks who ask me a lot, like, is this complaint worth it? Like, do you think that this is going to end up in a violation? Should I move forward? And I can't answer that in my role. Like, I am not allowed to say that. What I am always going to do is say, share forward. Because if we say this doesn't rise up to a policy level violation, we'll find that out. But I'd much rather have you speak up and be heard than to feel like, I don't know if this is worth it or not. It's always worth it. It's always worth it. And we want to create a community where you're willing to share and to know that we want to encourage you to go through a process always, that you deserve support. You deserve for us to consider what you're sharing forward. So I know that sometimes that's frustrating to students, where they're like, just tell me what you think. You were an investigator. Clearly, It's like, a personal Meredith would say lots of things, but Meredith as Title IX coordinator has to walk certain lines. And that's also why I make sure that folks have those other supports, because you can get some different answers from your advisor, from CMVSS, who can provide advocacy, and an advocate has a much different role than I do. The other reason why students usually get involved, I get involved, is that they're coming to me saying there's a problem. They're going through the conduct process, and this is both complainants and respondents, saying something's gone wrong. I feel as though I'm not getting X. I feel as though the investigator did Y, and that was a problem. And sometimes it's as easy as just sitting down and walking through some things, because this process is really confusing. Other times I'm helping people find an advisor, because they're trying to navigate it alone, and it's, you know what, this is not something you can do alone. Let's pause right now, and I'm going to connect you in with somebody immediately. I also find that because I investigated, when I have folks who are saying the investigator asked me this and it felt inappropriate, to be able to explain, like, let me explain to you why an investigator would ask you, for example, what were you wearing? I had to ask that as an investigator, because for me, it was, if you're saying, and then they took off my clothes. Well, what do we mean by clothes? And I had cases that actually would hinge on like what clothes were worn. I could tell you some examples, but like I had to ask those nitty gritty questions. What I learned as an investigator is that I would always preface before I ask those questions. And I would say, I'm about to ask you some questions about what you were wearing that night and how clothes came off in order, because I need to be able to understand all of these little details. So that way there was always that preface ahead of time before we verged into questions that seemed victim blaming. That's something where I can explain like why we ask what we do, and then make sure that our investigators are being very mindful of that prefacing. I think that we often in training teach investigators to be very by the book, when really like just being a human and saying, I'm about to ask these questions and this is why. It might not be like how it is on SVU, but you know what, students appreciate being told what's going on. So that's my job, is that whatever these problems are, to try to navigate and help students. And then for me to go back into our process and say, here's a problem, let's address it. We got to fix it. Our process, we think, is one that is fair, equitable, and thorough. But it doesn't mean that it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that every day we can't continue to do better and improve. So that's my job too, is to constantly be working on what can we do better with this process, especially being mindful that people who engage with our process, they are coming to us with a lot of hurt. This is all born out of harm. And a respondent is also in a place of great stress and emotion as well. So we're really navigating a lot of hurt on both sides. So how are we mindful constantly of trying to mitigate the hurt that gets magnified through going through this process? Yeah, I could go on about, like, I also get involved in our prevention work too, but I think that that's where like people are engaging with me the most, is in this process piece.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad you're touching on all of that, especially just the idea of wanting to be encouraging and making sure that it's comprehensive but human, and that it's acknowledging possible sensitivities and making sure that you're treating people as people. So I think that's crucial to prevention and to education, and certainly to the response side of things. So that overlaps a little bit with what we do in the Mentality Project as well, and just sort of the philosophy that I think you need to take with that. So that's wonderful. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit.
I just want to add really quickly though, I just think it's so awesome that we are encouraging our students to report and speak out and to tell your story. I feel like that's something that we don't hear in general. Like we tend to keep violence and sexual assault hush hush, but I appreciate Meredith, that you're really open about, hey, please share, please report, please open up, because that is the first step to healing, and that's also a step in making a huge change on our campus. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because you don't hear that a lot. So okay.
Oh. Well, and I'll say that, like, I've done a lot of work, and I give a lot of credit to our provost and president, because I keep, I say to them, the more reports, the better. That is always our metric, because we know what our rates are in terms of victimization. And until those report rates hit the victimization rates that we've measured, reporting going up is a good thing. And they know that, and that they're not afraid of the messaging that I have, which is the more we do to get people to disclose, the absolute better we are as a school. So I feel a lot of struggle with schools that don't feel that way, because it's like, why wouldn't you want to talk about your problem to make it better for your community? Just,
You know?
seriously.
Yeah, if you also wouldn't mind talking a little bit about new Title IX regulations and how that's sort of affected your work and reporting as well.
Yeah, so I'll start with the reporting piece. We, as of right now, we're measuring, since the school year dates are different between last year and this year, we're looking at the same number of days in terms of time period from the beginning of move in to where we are. So we're doing the same count. When we look at our last time we ran our numbers was like 2 weeks ago. And we are still above where we were last year in terms of disclosing, I'm sorry. And last year was a rebound year for us. So we were higher in 1920 than we were in 1819. So at this pace, we're exceeding our disclosure levels, which is good, because the Title IX regulations put into place systems that are very similar to what you see at schools in California and schools in the 6th Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, and that includes Michigan, Ohio, I think Indiana. It is Indiana for sure. And then the 7th Circuit as well. So what happened when these schools had to put in systems like this, these college court-like systems, is that the reporting levels dropped. Not just people who went through the process, but the disclosures to the university dropped, with the exception of the University of Michigan, because they have a very strong victim support services system there too. They're a good model, and one that we look to in terms of how are we doing, and we think that we have strong victim services as well. So the fact that we're exceeding our disclosure levels and haven't seen a reaction to the regulations is good. It doesn't mean that at any point this year we wouldn't see some they may drop, but that's why we're working so hard to continue to bring out, to say to folks, engaging with help does not mean at all that you have to go through the conduct process. It just means that you're engaging with help and support. And there is a big wall, and you have to affirmatively scale the wall with filing a report to get into the conduct process. The regulations, I'll be very blunt, have had a very, very deep impact on my work. It has, the way that it reconceptualizes Title IX is actually quite profound. In that Title IX was designed to deal with discrimination on the basis of sex in education that had been well measured. At the time that it was passed in 72, the access to education for women and girls was, it was so depressed in terms of enrollment, in terms of opportunity, in terms of financial aid. And then of course, we all know the sports piece. In 72, they didn't even think about sexual harassment as a form of Title IX, because we barely even thought about sexual harassment at all. So the way that it's now approached is that it's not about addressing discrimination on the basis of sex. The Department of Education says that now we are, there is an anti-discrimination mandate in Title IX, not related to sex. And because of that anti-discrimination mandate, it then equates the reports that you receive from those who say, I've experienced discrimination on the basis of sex, with those who are accused of those types of behaviors. Now, our code of conduct has rights and protections for students who are accused of, and then of course for faculty and staff in our OIE process, because you're a member of our community, you deserve due process, you deserve an opportunity to be supported in our community. We support respondents just as much as we do complainants, because that is what every good policy in terms of response should do. But now this has been put into Title IX itself, which is a really, really different way to look at civil rights, where you are saying that the civil rights protections are equal for those who are affected by discrimination and those who are committing discrimination. You don't see that in any other civil rights law. And so that has had, a ripple effect on Title IX. And I would say too, that for me personally, the difficult part is that the regulations are very concerned with bias from the Title IX coordinator. And so what does bias look like? Well, in some court filings, we've seen that there was a decision against the Purdue University that was written by our newest Supreme Court Justice, Amy Barrett, who said that having offices like Chelsea's at Purdue saying that men overwhelmingly perpetrate sexual violence, which they do against women, against other men as well, and then against non-binary folk, that was enough to say that they had a bias against men. So we can't even talk about science without that then raising questions of bias. So it puts me in this really weird position in terms of like, can I talk facts or what? I know I'm a little different from a lot of Title IX coordinators in that I am addressing community change. But it seems as though the Department of Ed wants people in my position to just be really quiet magistrates of the process. So that's something that we've kind of been struggling with over the past, 6 months is what does this mean for Title IX? Now, the three of us are sitting here talking as Pennsylvania might get called for Biden at any moment. So Biden has said that, that one of the first things he would do is to stop enforcing these new regulations. So we've made all of these changes, and then in a couple months we might need to
roll
change
back.
Yeah, exactly. Totally okay with that, let's say, because I do believe that the process that we have for non-Title IX misconduct is so much better, still provides due process, provides so many more opportunities to be heard in a lower stress, non-adversarial situation that doesn't accept that a college needs to be criminal. But still, it means that Title IX is a bit of a political football anymore. And in 4 years, then we might have a different administration and might change again. So there's a lot of uncertainty that these regulations have put in, and I can't blame students for being like, what the hell is going on? Because we're kind of in the same place too.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, at least thank you. It's a mess, but thank you at least for clarifying what is taking place now and what it could look like. And so for me personally listening, I think I have a lot more clarity on the process. And so thank you so much for taking time to do that. I'm so sorry about all of the changes that it's made in making your job harder. But I appreciate you so much.
Oh yeah, well, my father is a tax accountant, and when I was talking about these changes, he was like, well, the tax code changes all the time and you just have to roll with it. I'm like, well, Title IX's a little different from the tax code.
Right, it's a lot different.
Just a little, but I tried to take to heart what he was attempting to say, but I think the most important thing is, whatever I, am trying to figure out, like, how do I navigate my job? It's that if I'm in this place, what are students who are thinking about engaging with this process? And also, I think it must be really confusing for respondents as well. When you are named, when you are charged and said that you were going to be starting an investigation and it's not Title IX, because Title IX's been narrowed now. We're only looking at really cases that happen on campus and in Greek houses. And then to be told, well, you're not going to be going through the college court system. You're going to go through the regular Tulane one, and to say, well, wait a second, am I getting less protections then? That's not fair. And there must be a lot of confusion then too, because the DOE is saying one thing, and Tulane is saying another. And what I would say is that it's actually all consistent. It's that we have very different viewpoints on how issues should be handled. And the Trump administration has a different view than how the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations would approach things. So, we just need the more we can do to explain, to be very transparent, and to let every student know that our focus is to make sure that our process is fair, thorough, and equitable, regardless of which system you use, and that we're going to help you through. Because everybody is our student. And so we're going to treat all of our students with care and support, regardless of what they're accused of or what system they're using.
Absolutely. Alrighty, well, we're going to shift the second part of this conversation into essentially bridging the Mentality Project and Title IX together and just talking about healthy masculinity now. And so I was wondering if you could speak to what masculinity means to you and how masculinity shows up in either in your work, in your life, or any personal experiences that you could speak to in regards to masculinity.
Oh, yeah. So both my grandpas were big football stars in college. My papa will tell you, he's like a minor celebrity in Northwestern football history. My dad was a big time swimmer. He swam with Mark Spitz and a whole bunch of other Olympians as their alternate at Indiana. And then I have 5 siblings. And 3 of my brothers played Division I football. And one of them right now is an NFL coach. So I grew up in a very, not only were we dominated by sport, like we lived and died by sports, but that was like the idea of being very strong and being able to compete, being able to that masculinity was really equated to the strength that you needed to compete, to be able to be, especially all the football players, it takes a real mindset to be able to go onto the field and get beat up for a couple hours. My brother Frank played a game against the University of Hawaii, and one of the players stomped on his hand and broke it. And he still played the rest of the game because he was like, I play through pain. Yeah. And so
I'm
a man. Seriously, I'm like, you have no hand now. Like, right. What the hell? But and so that's what, when I grew up, actually something I remembered clearly was whenever one of us would get wormy, whiny and complaining, it would be, are you man or wuss? And then you would say, I'm a man. Even me and my sister Amanda. My sister Amanda also is a major athlete. She was the best athlete in the family. She's another swimmer. We'd all be like, we're a man. So then you'd suck it up and deal. Though Amanda and I were allowed to be weaker because we were girls, until Amanda turned out to be a stud. And so that really, I didn't even know that was so influenced. That's a very masculine household that I lived in. And I didn't figure that. I just figured everybody's families were like that until, you say, oh yeah, here are all the sports people in my family. And then it's like, well, what the hell? That's not usual. And I didn't, really come to realize that until I was working in higher education. And realizing that there are different ways for us to reconceptualize strength, and that to be presenting I have to be like men are in terms of being strong and competent. That's not who I am, and it really crystallized for me when I was an investigator at UConn. And I know this is going to sound weird, but what you do is you're taught to be an investigator like the SVU people, very hard charging, very strong, masculine. I have a very feminine style. It's very conversational, and it worked. I would get information on its students that they wouldn't give to anybody else. because that combative, aggressive way wouldn't really jive with people. But being able to just chat with them and care about them, it did. And that's when it really crystallized that, like, that way of approaching the world where it's like, I have to always be ready to fight and go into battle. Like that's not the only way. And when that kind of broke for me to realize I can be different, I don't have to be like my brothers. I'm not my brothers. And that's totally okay. Then I thought, well, maybe my brothers don't have to be the way that they've been taught how to be. And I like, that's when it kind of clicked in. And I don't think that there's something unhealthy um, about you know, being very masculine. I think though that idea of what is strong, what does it mean to be assertive for a man? We as women are, if we're struggling between what does it mean for us to be strong, for men, I think that there it really isn't that much of a conversation about how does it look to be different. And you know, like I mentioned, 3 of my brothers were football players. My 4th brother has physical disabilities, and he couldn't, you know, do any athletics. And so for him, strength had to look different, but he had to learn that on his own. And I wish that, you know, I look back and I think maybe we could have been, what would his life have been like, and mine and my sisters had been, if we had learned more about, like, strength can look different. And maybe that would have impacted my brothers who were approaching the world from that very much. I have to be strong. I can't cry. I can't be emotional. The only emotions really get to be anger and aggressiveness. What would that have meant for all of us to grow up?
Thank you for sharing your personal story with masculinity. That's something we haven't had on, I think, the conversation series so far, is people reflecting back and how their past has really influenced their lives now, and also like what could have been different if we would have embraced both masculine and feminine energies, and embraced, like you said, seeing strength as not a weakness, but or at least being emotionally, being vulnerable and being weak is not necessarily being weak. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think you painted a really beautiful picture with that story, and you highlight an excellent point. Just questioning what form strength can take on, and how reflecting on that is something that can make anyone of any identity a much healthier, much more happy person. So I really appreciate that you said that, and I think you said it better than I've heard in a long time. So I appreciate that a lot. Tying back into your work a little bit more, and talking about this concept. You've been here since the climate survey and since the Mentality Project was created. Can you touch a little bit on why this work needs to be done, and sort of what the reason was that Mentality Project was created in your eyes?
I think this work needs to be done because of that idea that we have. I think that because girls and women were being, and I'm purposefully focusing on girls and women because that's where Title IX was created to address. And when we look at how we continue to oppress and marginalize queer and trans folk, it all flows out of the gender constructs that we have around women and femininity, because these are also, like, when you look at, this is so legal. When you're looking at Title IX and the application to folks who are in the LGBTQ community, the legal argument is that you are punishing them because they are not conforming to the sex stereotypes that we have for folks. But it all comes from that first place of, we expect this from girls and women, we expect this from boys and men. And so when I think about there's been more progress, I think, to deal with this, the limitations that we've given to girls and to women around the construct of gender roles because of all of the access that was denied. I mean, it's important to remember that my mom and dad got married in 1976. My mother was not able to open her own bank account still in 76, or have her own credit card. She went from having my papa, my grandpa, sign off on opening a bank account for her, and then she had to have my dad joint bank account. She couldn't have one on her own. I was born only 3 years later. Like, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
And it's only been recently that we've really started to unpack how many limitations there are. So there's been all of that concerted work then focusing on girls can be anything. Girls can be, strong athletes. Girls can do math and science and all of that. We've not done the same kind of conversations for boys and men. The boys can be home ec teachers. Boys can care. It's okay to cry. That thing about boys don't cry. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they really do. And it's okay to cry when it's not just about sports. Because I swear to you, it was totally okay when my brother Frank burst into tears when his team like finished number 10 in the country when he was a senior. Oh, it's totally okay for them to cry. But if he cried over other things, then he's being weak. Like, why is it that we only are allowing men to be emotional in certain ways and in certain circumstances? Like, we haven't had the kind of work because we don't see, men have had all of these career opportunities and educational opportunities the way that we have to reprogram kind of our culture when it comes to girls and women. And in that, then we haven't had that same conversation on boys are allowed to be anything. Masculinity and femininity, we can borrow and take what's best for us as individuals. And because of that, it's created this nasty little like sinkhole that that we are now trying to, I think, patch up or close, or I don't know what the right analogy is. I'm thinking about Interstellar and trying to close the black hole or something. We've fallen through the rabbit hole. Let's do ourselves well and spin back over. I think that's why the Mentality Project is so important, because college is where y'all are experimenting on and figuring out who am I going to be for the rest of my life. Because this is the place where you're now pulling away from your parents and making these decisions about like, okay, so who am I and what is my life going to look like? And for us to have those moments of introspection that focus on like, I get to define what I feel. I get to define how I want to engage with the world without having to have those expectations of, well, a man reacts this way and a woman reacts this way. Instead, it's I get to honor how I feel inside, and that's okay. The Mentality Project being able to empower men to define themselves is education we probably needed to have done all the way back in kindergarten. So like, we're missing the consent education from kindergarten forward that should be happening. We're missing that kind of, boys get to be whomever they want to be too. You can be a nurse. You can be, sensitive. You can be anything you want. And I think this project is a way, belatedly, to start to give that kind of freedom to men to reshape what does it mean to be a man.
Absolutely. It sounds like, or you were saying that we've still not had these conversations around masculinity in our society. And so, in your opinion, do you still think there is an expectation, and maybe even at Tulane, and for males or masculine identified folks to adhere to the stereotypes or fit into a man box? You still see that happening?
Oh yeah, I mean, look at right now our choices of president. In that you have our incumbent president who is very masculine coded. I am very, very strong, talks about strength a lot. And then the Joe Biden is very empathetic. In fact, you can see that like empathy is probably his strongest suit, where he cries. He gets very emotional.
He's a Scorpio, by the way. He's a Scorpio, so he's very emotional. Trying to throw astrology into here, y'all, for watching.
That's for all. Yeah, everybody who's got their chart out now is like,
Right.
yeah. And you know, and what do we see? Like, what do we see now about wearing a mask for COVID? It was Joe Biden wears a mask, and who was it that said, "Would you like a purse for that mask, Joe?" Which, wait, really? Because I listened to our public health faculty and Scott Timms and the rest of campus health who are telling me that a mask is a way to save lives, which makes me feel really strong when I put on a mask because I am taking care of other people. I don't have COVID, but I am going to make sure that I don't spread it and I'm going to keep myself safe. But it's really about other people because caring about other people is strength, which is what we've been trying to do here with sexual violence work, is that it's to ask for consent means that you care about your sexual partner as much as you care about your own good time. And we continue to struggle with getting that message through. And so when I see that then appearing in COVID, then it's like, oh, these are kind of connected, aren't they? And then to watch the COVID thing now becoming like a mass or symbol of masculinity and strength. It's like, what the hell is wrong with us? Like, how did we get here? So we're still struggling with this as at this very moment when you know, going into public with a tiny piece of fabric over your mouth and nose is seen as weakness. And why is that? Well, it comes from our leader who feels as though that is weak himself. He's made that actually very apparent. So that's what we have to deconstruct, because that idea that a mask is weak is why we're at a place where 230,000 Americans are dead. And why we have, you know, people who think that if you ask for consent, like that's, you know, no consent, that's like too hard, or that's not worth it, or stuff. And that then means that we have got the rates that we do when it comes to sexual assault and rape. So caring, empathy, which are feminine coded, are actually the things that are for public health are so powerful. And how do we then make care and empathy strong, these feminine characteristics, versus the masculine traditional stereotypes, because clearly those aren't working for us. So yeah, not at all. So we have to flip the script, because you know, we're talking about people getting hurt when it's in sexual violence. We're talking about people's lives when it comes to COVID. We've got to reframe this narrative somehow, that care for others is the strongest thing that you can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think that emphasizing that message of empathy is, and that caring is strength, that helping is strength, is a wonderful message to be relaying. Yeah. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I also wanted to ask, going back to your experience in Title IX, could you speak a little bit more to how often you see or have seen masculine identified folks accessing services and reporting? And if that's not often, what do you think are some of the reasons that might be happening? Does that tie into what we're talking about strength? Does that tie into what we're talking about emotions? If you could just elaborate on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Absolutely. We do not see men or male identified students coming in and seeking services. When they do, they are usually queer or trans. And there is, we know from the climate survey that there are straight men who are being assaulted. And we also know that when straight men are assaulted on this campus, it is, even though that number is smaller than our queer male students who are being assaulted, for straight men, they are being assaulted by women, and in incapacitation situations mostly. So those folks aren't coming forward, and maybe it's because, like a lot of the women and female identified students, that they think it's not that big of a deal, it's not worth reporting. Those are some of the main factors why women aren't reporting to the university. So it could be that, but gosh, you really have to think too that it's because there's so much shame around help seeking for men. That to talk about, and I think in particular, if you're assaulted by a woman, what that says about your masculinity, when what that says is that you were sexually assaulted and you deserve help and you deserve support. You deserve to be able to process this, even if the end of the day you're like, I'm okay, I'm doing all right. But to be affirmed that what happened is not okay, and that if you need help, it's here. But we don't really encourage that from men. I mean, what is how many men engage willingly with therapy? And we know about the mental health crisis that we had on college campuses, period. We know that for men who are struggling with self-harm, that suicide rates are higher for men. And that comes down to too, like how many men are willing to say, I'm struggling and I need help. It's larger, it's all blurred out. And it means then that we've got this population on our campus who have been harmed, who either have to say, it's not harm, I wanted that, because men always want sex. Of course we do. Even though something inside of them is saying, no, I really didn't. But what are we telling men about sex? And that also that larger help seeking barriers that we put in, because asking for help means to access your emotions, and we don't encourage that. So it worries. You know, I look at our reporting numbers, and those numbers from men are so small, but I think that the message is of you can get help is not going to be enough for letting men know that you can turn to help and support, because we have to break down that barrier of what's preventing men from seeking help in the first place in all of the different ways that they can struggle. So it's going to be more than just breaking down some of these rape myths that stand in the way of victims being able to get help, because we also have to break down barriers between men and getting help. But for us, I think I'm kind of struggling to find the right way to say that. Whenever I see large gaps in reporting, I always am struggling with why. There must be something larger with the community. There must be like a community factor here. And for men, it seems to be this larger cultural issue. So we're going to need to attack this from a lot of different angles. Because if we can start to break down the barriers for seeking reporting for sexual assault, and we can do the same for mental health, we can do the same for substance abuse. And I think this is a much broader issue that our male sexual violence victims are just caught in this nasty, really bad cycle of again, telling men how you're supposed to deal with things that hurt and what is allowed to make you hurt.
You provided some really great tips that I definitely will know on my end on how we can do this work a little bit better. And I was just wondering if, for those that are listening, if you wanted, especially Tulane students, if you could provide like any tips on being a positive role model against, unhealthy masculinity, and also to our faculty and staff, how can they infuse healthy masculinity into their work so we can continue to work towards violence prevention on campus?
Oh gosh, that's a great question.
Any quick tips? Nothing, too
yeah.
major.
Yeah. You know what? Also, I'm going to use an example from my brother. I mentioned my brother who was allowed to cry when they won. That's the NFL coach. He's very good actually what he does. Who knew? And he said that one of the best things that has made him a better coach is by actually caring about his players, and that he really he creates human connections and gets really deep with them. And one of his players just like made the Pro Bowl last year, and I guess had a lot of drug problems. And for Frank, it was like, if I care about you as a person and find out like who you are, that's going to help me better have a relationship with you than yelling at you or the other ways that like coaches think they can motivate people. Like it was him embracing a caring aesthetic that has made him into such a good coach. And by the way, if you like Foster Moreau from LSU, Frank's the one who drafted him. So you should be listening to me when I say be like Frank. And to hear that, like to see like that's my brother, my hyper masculine brother was like, caring is actually the best way to motivate. That I think is like, I come back to that all the time. And I think the more that we're able to see that as like, if you want to call it coaching, if you want to call it mentoring, if that makes you feel a little like less like care, however you want to phrase it, but the way that if you treat the people with you in terms of encouragement and support and caring about their value as a human being, that will always get you into a more genuine place. So listening and valuing. I think that's the way to start, because you're not then coming in with preconceived notions of strength and what you're supposed to do. You're listening to that other person and saying, you know, you get to be your own individual, and so do I. And we're going to connect in this way that is, I think, very deep, like, because I acknowledge your value and I'm not assuming something of you. And I think that's what we have to stop doing with men, is always assuming what a man is going to do or feel or react. And I've learned, you know, that's how, well, I was already doing that, but it just made me think like, maybe that's the way forward, is for us to think about this as how are we just connecting? And whether you're a student or faculty or staff member, when you're engaging with men, let go of those things about like, well, he's not supposed to, or maybe I shouldn't be encouraging so hard for them to get victim services, because are they really like a victim? Yeah. And if you start from that level of letting go of what you're supposed to do, then maybe the person who has been in, you know, the man that you're engaging with can let go of, I'm supposed to react in this way because I'm being seen for who I am. And now I get to actually react in a true way. And we can do more for each other.
That was excellent. I really think you're just on point, hitting everything as you should. And I think this messaging is crucial for Tulane students to hear, especially masculine identified ones that might have preconceptions about what it means and expectations and pressures on them. So it's really awesome to just hear and have this conversation and unpack sort of the solutions as opposed to just the problems that we're seeing, and talk about really what that looks like, what it can be, and how these things are, how masculinity and femininity can be blended in such a healthy way. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and for sharing your wisdom. Certainly love to have you back in the future. And I think we're going to wrap up for today. Chelsea, I'll let you say any closing points you have, and Meredith, if you want to also share anything else you have, and just point students in the direction of keeping in touch with Title IX, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about our efforts on campus, both in terms of prevention and response, you can go to allin.tulane.edu. Plus, the Title IX office has got an Instagram account. It's Title IX, or Tulane Title IX, I think. And our Facebook as well is Title IX Tulane, or Tulane Title IX. Oops. You can tell I'm not on social media and I don't do that. And lastly, you could always email me at msmith76@tulane.edu.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And yes, I really want to encourage, if you're watching this recording now, please reach out to Title IX office if you need any resources or services. They really are here for you. Meredith and Julia are amazing. And I really appreciated both of y'all taking time this semester to talk to us about healthy masculinity. It's just so nice to have that coordinated community response when it comes to this issue that we're experiencing. And so, yeah, like Magnus was saying, we'd love to have you back. But thank you so much for all the wonderful tips, insights, and things that you shared with us. But till next time, everyone, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next Monday on another Mentality Monday. Bye now.